G'day, May 40 here. I'm reading a fascinating book from 2020. It's called Postjournalism and the Death of Newspapers, the Media After Trump, Manufacturing Anger and Polarization. So this, I assume, is published after Donald Trump lost the 2020 election. So it's by a bloke, Andrew Meir. And he says, fake news is a way overhyped issue, right? We're not troubled by fake news. The greatest harm caused by the news media is polarization. And the biggest issue is polarization is systematically embedded in both social media and mass media. It's not a side effect. It is the basis of business success. Right. So Trumpism was simply a continuation of Occupy Wall Street movement, but on a completely different demographic basis. So the people who initially got online were young, and they were educated, and they were tech savvy. And then older, rural, conservative people got online later. And so they formed the basis for Donald Trump's support. So how do you get high user engagement? All right, by tapping into their strongest emotions. And it used to be that people would advertise in newspapers and on TV, but now advertisers and audiences are fleeing to better platforms where they get more bang for the buck, where content is free, more attractive, ad delivery is cheaper and far more efficient. So the whole classical business model of the news media is being shaken up so hard that it's very difficult for the news media to survive. And ad revenue is declining much faster than reader revenue. So the media is switching to the reader revenue business model to sell content. Now, content is free on the internet. It is hard to sell. People don't go looking for news. News goes looking for people, goes looking for an audience. Okay, I like Luke's story of a TV starlet who liked him, but sadly he did not go for it. I was introduced not to a TV starlet, bro, to the brunette co-star of Mulholland Drive. So I was at a party for, I think, the 60th birthday party for the director David Lynch. And I was introduced to Laura Haring, right? Former Miss World. And a producer friend introduced me to her and tried to set us up, and I was too intimidated. But I mean, she's stunning, absolutely stunning. Miss World. She's got some nude scenes in the movie with the Australian actress, whatever her name is now. But yeah, I was just too intimidated, mate. I don't think I've ever dated anyone over an 8. Just my insecurity gets triggered. So Gene Hackman dies at 95, and he was married to a 63-year-old. And why did she want to die with him? Right? Why? That's crazy. That doesn't seem right. She was a classical pianist, right? Classical pianists live very long lives. Why did she choose to commit suicide with Gene Hackman? That's disturbing. All right, people usually know the news before they come to news sites because they usually start their daily routine with news feeds on social media. So people now turn to news media not to find news, but to validate what they already know. So the reader revenue that news now seeks is not payment for news. It is more of a validation fee. The audience agrees to pay for the validation of news within a particular hero system. So news has switched from ad revenue to reader revenue, and so the business of news has changed from news supply to news validation. Does Luke date women outside his faith? Non-kosher women, so to say. Well, I have done that once, twice. Look, no more than 57 times. But I now understand how fruitless that is. I now understand how that takes me away from the path of Torah and of righteousness and the type of upstanding life that I want to live. So I'm swearing off the shiksas, bro. I really am swearing off the shiksas. I mean, unless they're open to converting to Orthodox Judaism, how could they possibly become open to converting to Orthodox Judaism unless they get to experience like a taste of the holiness and the transcendence and the meat and potatoes of Orthodox Judaism? So I'm totally swearing off the shiksas, bro. Just honest engine. but I feel a moral obligation to at least offer a tasty morsel of Orthodox Judaism to those attractive young women who are spiritually searching. It would be inconsiderate of me. It would be selfish of me. I just can't sit back and be unconcerned for their spiritual welfare. And so many of them will never know that they have the opportunity to convert to Orthodox Judaism. And who am I not to at least offer it? It might be their spiritual path. Now, I'd never try to talk anyone who's already in a religion or who has lots of fond memories of the religion they were raised in, right? They should stay there. You should live and be well. You should go back to the religion that you were raised in. Luke, I'd love to hear Hugh Hefner stories, Inside Jews. So the best Hugh Hefner stories were put together in an A&E, something like 10, 11, 12-part series on the dark side of the Playboy mansion. So they did a better job than what I was able to dig up. What did I dig up? That there was a weird relationship between Hugh Hefner and his daughter. And but overall, A&E series on the dark side of Hugh Hefner, that's a must view. All right, you're interested in this topic? Let me dig up the name of that A&E series. Meanwhile, let's get some John Podhoretz.
Hope there will be reporting on how Bezos got to this conclusion and decided to do what he is doing. And by the way, I'm going to make a defense of the cravenness, if you want to call it that, of him trying to make nice with the president of the United States. Grow up, everybody in media. People who own newspapers and have owned organs of, magazines, things like that. When they do so at a loss, they're doing so not out of the goodness of their heart because they are hoping to spread the message that democracy dies in darkness. They do so for all kinds of complicated reasons. But when you work for them and they lose money, and I have been in two such circumstances in my life, one with Rupert Murdoch when I was the arts and editorial page editor and a columnist at the New York Post when Murdoch was losing $30-40 million a year on the Post. And once earlier in my career, when I worked for Sun Myung Moon at the Washington Times, who was also losing tens of millions of dollars. They did so for complicated reasons. What was allowed to me and to the people who worked with me at the Post and at the Washington Times was the ability to ply our trade in a functional news organization that produced a daily paper in which I was allowed to edit and write, and other people were allowed to edit and write and do reporting and make a living and do all that. And if what they wanted was for the paper to say we should create a space force to send people to live on Pluto, and I was the editorial page editor, I would write that editorial. Or I would quit if I couldn't really support that.
Can we add another layer of context to this as well that I think goes missing in this story about Bezos? And that's that reporters in legacy media have for decades, and most recently for the 4 years of the Biden administration, actively cozied up to people in power. I mean, Kamala Harris was notorious for having lots of reporters come to the Veep's mansion and have dinners and cocktails and all kinds of socializing, which then redound to their benefit when they try to, cover up someone's cognitive or physical decline or get themselves installed without any sort of democratic process to become a new nominee to replace said declining figure.
Maybe that's a good segue to one of the other media stories just before we get to Biden, this whole controversy about the White House Correspondents Association and the press pool that follows President Trump, and Caroline Leavitt, the White House press secretary, saying that now the president, the office of the president, will decide which reporters are following President Trump at a given time. One of the reporters who was very close to Kamala Harris is Eugene Daniels, formerly of Politico, who's now an MSNBC person.
Well, he just quit because he's going to have a show on MSNBC.
He's going to quit Politico.
Which I imagine he is going to display the latest in fashions.
He's a very fashionable person. I've met him many times. He's extremely friendly. He's fun to talk to, but he's also extremely close to Harris and the Democrats. Now he's going to be on MSNBC, and he's the head of the White House Correspondents Association that's complaining about the Trump treatment of the press.
Okay, so you got to watch The Secrets of Playboy, right? If that's what you're interested in, dark stories about Hugh Hefner, right? He had cameras operating, all right, that were capturing all sorts of things going on at his parties, and so he had blackmail, and so he got almost no bad press during his life. So check out Secrets of Playboy. It's something like a 12-part series on A&E. It's available on the sharing sites. So you want inside stories about Hugh Hefner, right? Go there. And the dog too. Why did they take the dog with them? So maybe it was a gas leak several days earlier. Yeah, maybe. But there were pills around. So maybe they loved their dog so much that they wanted their dog to go with them to heaven. Inquiring minds want to know. It is disturbing. So I love this, that the reader revenue the news media now seeks is not a payment for news. It is a validation fee. The audience agrees to pay for the validation of news within their particular hero system. So mass media is now desperately searching for appropriate pitches and formats for this last resort business model. So new forms of funding are being tested. Among the most promising are philanthropy funding and the membership model. Right? Philanthropy funding usually comes via foundations, and it assumes that the media picks up a pressing social issue and pledges to cover it for a grant or continued funding from a nonprofit foundation. What could possibly be wrong with that? Right? Doesn't that sound beautiful? Right? Peace, love, and understanding. Is that not providing the understanding that our polarized, troubled society so desperately needs? Okay, but there are some problems with this model. Right, this inevitably leads journalists to just focus on triggering topics. Right, they will cover those stories that will either get funding or that will get subscriptions. And so journalists have to surrender their autonomy to foundations, which have their own agendas, and to a membership model that kind of marries the motives of philanthropy with a traditional subscription. So with the membership model, right, the media offers a noble cause. Guys, I am fighting for you against the elites. I am on your side, all right? I am taking your concerns to Washington. The elites are screwing you over, but I'm fighting for you. And if you join my channel, even just with the low tier 1 subscription level, right, you will help me take my fight to more people and help them to become aware of how they're being screwed over by our elites. And I am so passionate about this fight that I've just dedicated my whole life to fighting for the little guy and letting him know how he's being screwed over by big government and big media and big academy and big business, man. You're being screwed over, but I am fighting for you. I'm on your side, and won't you help me take this message of liberation and truth and freedom, the American way, and return our country to the constitutional values upon which it was founded. Please help me take this message to more people so that we can make America great again. Right? That's a business model. Right? There's the noble cause, guys. I'm fighting for you. And I want you to join me, and let's make America great again. But these causes, all right, they have to be those causes that will elicit the most donations. Right? So the membership model calls readers to pay not for the news, but for public service, right, to cover certain social issues or to just cover the news from a certain angle or from within a particular value system. So for the first time in 4 months, I've got my air conditioner running, and I had to add a noise filter to my OBS, which can really screw with the noise quality. I am pleasantly surprised that no one's yet complained about the news quality. Without the OBS noise filter, without the noise suppression, you'd hear the air conditioner running in the background. It's bloody 80 degrees out there. All right. And I start to lose my mental acuity when it gets hotter. All right. normally I like the temperature about 76, but when I'm live streaming, I am using more of my cognitive resources than pretty much any other time in my life. And the more I'm working, the more my brain is working, the cooler the temperature, right? Dennis Prager does his nationally syndicated radio show back in the day, and he would like the temperature in the 50s because your brain just seems to work better when it's cold. When I'm not live streaming, then 76, 78 is absolutely fine for me. But when I'm live streaming, if I can get it down into the 50s, that's simply when I'm sharpest. My mind works better because my mind works, at a higher RPM when I'm live streaming than pretty much any other time in my life. So the more I'm working cognitively, the more I need cooler air. Okay, so there's a big difference between traditional news retail, so you're just giving the news away for free and packaging it with advertising, and the membership model, right? Someone who pays is not a reader, right? The person who pays is not doing it to get news for themselves. They already know the news. They pay for the news to be delivered to others. They pay for the cause, right? So people who subscribe to the New York Times, well, 90% hate Donald Trump, and they're paying to get the news out there for other people so that they can learn how bad Donald Trump is. So this membership model leads the media to set a certain agenda and to promote certain values, right? Democracy dies in darkness, guys. And so they pitch for money from the most active part of their former audience, now the donating audience. So they're looking for that validation fee. And if you're going to get people to subscribe, you have to present a newsroom that shares their values, not the news, but shares their values. So we're seeing journalism mutating into crowd-funded propaganda, otherwise post-journalism. So we had the rise of social media. So it's widely thought, the right dominates the internet, but the internet is dominated by people who aren't represented in the mainstream media, whether on the right or on the extreme left, right? If you're not in the media, you're going to look for a place to legitimate how you see the world, and so you'll likely come online if you're not getting that from the networks and the major newspapers. So one method that the major newspapers are now pitching for people to subscribe is democracy, guys. We're promoting the noble cause of democracy. Please join me in promoting this noble cause of democracy dies in darkness. Right? So the traditional transaction of selling news has become soliciting philanthropy. Right? People in the news business have started seeking subscriptions in the form of a donation because I'm fighting for your values. So we have two new categories of people who pay for news: those who pay a validation fee for the news validation service of the media, and the donating audience contracting with the media to try to influence other people. And so both types are paying for the news media, not for the news, but for the impact, right? They want to incentivize the news media to change the country. Now, both forms of mainstream media, both the liberal and the conservative, performed very well during the age of Trump. But try to publish a book about Joe Biden, no interest, right? The news media crashed during the Biden age because he was just so damn boring. Now, Trump is back, and the media are pitching their services as a noble cause because they need to attract an audience and its support in the form of donations or time spent. So the media are incentivized to amplify and dramatize those issues whose coverage is most likely to be paid for. Just like I am incentivized to provide commentary and conversations and interviews that people are most likely to throw down super chats for. So only news and opinions that help to create support and donations increasingly pass editorial scrutiny. So the news media have to press certain social issues to attract support. And they also have to support and amplify their readers' anger and irritation and frustration with regard to those issues, because the more angry people become, the more emotional people become, the more concerned people become, the more likely they will donate. So if news relies on ad revenue or on reader revenue, the news is incentivized to paint two different and even opposite pictures of the world. Right? The media that relies on ad revenue wants to make the world look pleasant, just like mainstream movies. They want to have a happy ending. The media relying on reader revenue, subscriptions, needs to make the world look grim, because the more grim, the worse the world is, the more we've got a disaster at our hands. Like, democracy is in peril. We've got the rise of fascism. My God, this White House, it's restricting the White House White House Correspondents Association, and now this damn Trump White House, they're even trying to select those reporters who get to ask questions. Our very democracy is at stake. This reminds me of my days in Moscow covering Putin, says Peter Baker and his wife Susan Glasser. Peter Baker at the New York Times, Susan Glasser at the New Yorker. And so you have to amplify people's irritation and frustration. You have to amplify their unhappiness. The more unhappy people become, the more likely they will be to donate. And it's the same revenue model for talk radio. You have to make people angry. I used to really enjoy Dennis Prager. Then when he went daily, so he used to just do a show on Saturday and Sunday nights, and it was deep and thoughtful. But when he went daily, he had to revert to the right-wing model of riling up the audience. Well, left-wing has the same model. But the business model for both the New York Times and talk radio is to get your audience as angry and upset as possible. Thank you, Grasshopper, leaving a like to keep the lights on. I love this. So if you rely on ad revenue, you're incentivized to make the world look good. And if you rely on subscriptions, you're incentivized to make the world look really bad. So I noticed when I started listening to Dennis Prager when he went daily, that I was increasingly unhappy, that I would come away from listening to his show angry and stirred up and unhappy, that listening to his version, at least of right-wing talk radio, made me less adaptive to reality and more unhappy. It damaged my life. And in general, the more the news can damage your life and warp your priorities and manipulate your emotions, the more successful it will be. All right, so the subscription membership business model for news must push certain pressing political issues and be as polarizing as possible, right? That there's no business model in calming social and political conflicts. The only business model is increasing and firing up social and political conflicts. The more you can have people out of their minds with rage and discomfort and fear and anxiety, the more money you're going to make. And same with live streamers and talk radio, right? The more damage you can do, the more money you can make. Right? While ad-driven media wants people to be happy, and subscription-driven news wants people to be angry. So the ad-driven happy model wants readers to become consumers, and the subscription-driven model for news wants people to be as angry and upset as possible. Astro Hubba says, I stopped caring about losers who believe that Trump is in charge of the news media. So here's a great quote from Neil Postman, I think it's from the 1980s. Surrounding every technology are institutions whose organization, not to mention their very reason for being, reflects the worldview promoted by the technology. Therefore, when an old technology is assaulted by a new one, institutions are threatened. When institutions are threatened, a culture finds itself in crisis. I remember living through the 1980s and now finding out people getting their news online. Rush Limbaugh started talking about this in 1985, 86. So he would get his news from CompuServe. And we started having faxes. And I thought, wow, we live in an age of such incredible technological change. Why pay both an analyst and a therapist when 40 breaks-through anal rapist treatment combines both services, now accepting new patients? Are you able to walk after our last session, Kip? I know that we went deep. I know it was painful, but you got to be willing to do the work, bro. If you're willing to do the work, I'm willing to do the work with you. And together, we will walk hand in hand to a better world. I really think you can do this. I believe in you, Kip. Let's do the work together. Perhaps it was Ernest Hemingway who said, any story is a tragedy. You just need to tell it honestly till the very end. Probably there are millions of today's students who have never, ever touched a newspaper. And it was in 8th grade that I decided I wanted to become a journalist when I grew up. Right. One of the most important factors for the decline of newspapers, the media lost its monopoly over agenda setting because the internet offered an alternative and superior mode. Audiences and advertisers migrated to better platforms that provided more efficient advertising. And 3, the competition for time spent with media became extremely intense, and newly arriving digital media much more efficient at capturing users' attention. So the legacy media has an increasingly shrinking share of our daily time. Now, when people are at home, they're not usually listening to the radio. All right, I used to listen to a lot of radio. I would, on Saturday nights in high school, last 2 years of high school, I would tune into Lee Pete and this gambling show out of Las Vegas. Lee Pete and Jim Brown, and they talk about Lee Pete and Jim Brown, and they talk about the next day's football games. Okay, Stardust Sports Line. Oh, Lee Pete, man. Oh, he died in 2010. So he was born in 1924. But I would listen to him in 1983, 84, and his co-host was Jim Brown. So I wasn't the most socially successful. I spent many of my Saturday nights listening to 3 hours of conversation about gambling. Good old Leland Pete, American sports radio broadcaster, played college football, sports talk show host on KDWN in Las Vegas. So at night, I'd be able to pick it up in Auburn. He had the longest running sports betting show in the history of radio. Yeah, I remember he would have Jim Brown. He had very smart people. So he established sports talk radio show on KDWN in 1981. So by 1982 or so, I was listening. Show ran from 10 until midnight. He sought enough advertising to expand the show to 7 days a week. It was the longest running sports betting show in the history of radio. One of his most valuable talents was his ability to ask the stupid question, the answer to which nobody knows, which everybody assumes is obvious. He finished his career retiring in 2002, and he died in 2010. So, yeah, I spent a lot of time from 10 p.m. to midnight listening to gambling shows. I was my high school bookie. Oh, man, we've got a complete show. So this is what I used to listen to, if anybody cares.
No-hitter within sight. The pitch on the way to Baker. Ground ball to third. Now has it. Here it is, and it's over.
Seabiscuit on the lead by 2 lengths. War Admiral is second to him, and Kurtzinger sitting still. Now War Admiral's trying to move to him.
Basinger calling signals. Basinger to Tuning. Tuning is headed to the line of scrimmage and stopped by Bryant. Second down, still 2 yards to go for a touchdown. Robinson right into the body. Both of them standing toe to toe. Here's Silver with a left to the right ear. Another left hook to the straight to the left. That's Playboy. They finally break.
And now we take you live to the Stardust Hotel on the glittering Las Vegas Strip and into the largest and most luxurious race and sports book in the state. From this vantage point, KDON Radio presents the Stardust Line with Lee Pete and Jim Brown. Join Lee and Jim as they talk sports by calling 732-6587 within the state of Nevada. Outside the state, call toll-free 800-634-6586. Or you're invited to see Lee Pete and Jim Brown and their guests from the sports world as they talk sports from the magnificent race and sports book in the Stardust Hotel Casino in Las Vegas. The information given on this program is for your enjoyment only. And now, the Stardust Line.
Good evening, everybody. We welcome you to the Stardust Line. I am Lee Pete, and to my immediate left.
So I spent over 1,000 hours, thousands of hours of my youth listening to this show.
A man that wishes he was in the shape I'm in, Jim Brown.
Well, I'd love to be you, Lee. Whew, God, long way.
I don't understand how you look so good and there's 6 months difference in our ages.
All these people love you out there.
Yeah. You okay?
I'm fine.
That's all I want to hear.
Had a wonderful sports weekend. I saw the West Germans operate
Let me ask you
in
something.
the World Championship.
How do you like the look of the West German women?
I'll tell you, it's a new trend.
Whew.
Yes, the Jim Brown, the great running back, Jim Brown, and Lee Peep would have the smartest gamblers on the show. I mean, I learned so much. These were not wasted hours.
It means that we're all going to be the same soon. We'll not know the difference between each other.
I can't believe I saw a couple of them. Is it styro? What are they doing to him? Something's happening.
Well, I can't really tell you what's happening, Lee, but I'll tell you something. I can't pronounce the name, but she won the 400 meters in world record time and 800 meters in world record time. And they did allude on TV to the fact that she was very masculine. But I never saw anything like that. I mean, they are dealing with perfection.
Something's going on different in ours, because most of our gals still look like young ladies to a certain extent.
Yeah, they really look feminine, and Mary Decker was great today, and she's still feminine and the feminine body. And I saw this person coming down in the 800 meters, and I almost jumped into the television when they said it was a woman.
You think it was? Think they switched?
I'll never know. But she set a world record, man, and the stride was tremendous.
Yeah.
The power and the body, the chest. I didn't see anything that I thought was feminine.
Well, maybe it's just as well I'm at the age I'm at if it's all changing. I have a friend here tonight with me, and he is a friend. Thank God he turned gray at the right time. I'm going to have him come up here for a few minutes. Mort Olson's coming over in a little while. The gentleman has the gold sheet, Lem Banker. Don, come on up a minute. Come on around here. Come on and sit down. This gentleman here and I have been bouncing around together for I don't want to tell you how long.
So I would read books. Lem Banker, I mean, he had the top sports betting minds, all right, on his show. I mean, Lem Banker's a legend. It was just a terrific show.
Don's one of the really fine announcers in the Midwest. Last year he did the Bowling Green University in basketball. He's done hockey and all the good things. University of Toledo.
So I spent so much time listening to, I don't know if they had Jimmy the Greek on, but I spent so much time in my youth. I came to America at age 11, and then within the first year, some admirer of my father gave us a radio, and I took it as my own, and it just opened up a world to me. And so I would listen to the radio as soon as I got up in the morning. I'd listen to KCBS News, and KNBR News, Sports, and then I would work a job in the afternoon after school, and so I'd be listening to the radio as I jogged to my job, which was about 2 or 3 miles away. Then I'd listen to the radio while I was working for 3 or 4 hours in the afternoon. Then I'd listen to the radio jogging home. Then if no one was around, I'd listen to the radio. I'd listen to sports talk, either news or sports talk. And so I was listening to news or sports talk probably 6 hours a day on average, except for Shabbat. And I just take my radio with me everywhere. Just absolutely fell in love with radio. And I can't remember the last time I turned on a radio. Yeah, it was, I just moved to a place, and the Cowboys were playing the New England Patriots. So it was like October or November of 2011. And I wanted to catch the end of the Cowboys Patriots game. And I was tuning around on the radio, and I found it on the radio. So it's been so many years since I turned on a radio. Elliot Blatt, my sobriety is at risk. Bro, is there something I can do? Have I been too stimulating? They groom young 40 to be a degenerate gambler. Yeah. Or someone had some formula on horse racing, and so I was always the bookie, and I'd take a vig of like 10%, and I thought I can't lose, but someone did a number on me with horse racing, and I ended up owing him over $1,000 and paying him off something like $200, saying, hey, I'm leaving town, I'm moving to Australia after high school. They groomed young 40 to be a degenerate gambler. No, 40 was not a happy kid. He had untreated ADHD, and so he had to meet his need for excitement by getting into gambling. But the tentacles of 12 Steps Torah and the Alexander technique has gripped Luke as a kid bouncing around on his kangaroo. God, Lee Pete and Jim Brown and Lem Banker and all the great bookies, the Stardust sports line. Wow, so many memories right now flooding back from 1983, 84. So I graduated high school in June of 84. I was the editor of my high school newspaper in my senior year. And before that, I was the news editor of my high school newspaper. And I also wrote for the Auburn Journal, did some freelancing for the Sacramento Bee, and I did a weekly radio segment for K-High Radio during my sophomore and junior years of high school. Okay. But when did you last turn on the radio? Radio is not a medium of choice when people are at home, right? There are just too many other amazing digital seductions. But radio ratings have recovered because people got back in the car. So a mortal threat to radio will be the self-driving car. Now, the pandemic has changed the tactile habits of the masses. And for centuries, the news was delivered in a tactile way through newspapers and magazines. So millions have joined the ranks of the germaphobes during COVID and will probably be even less inclined to pick up a newspaper or a magazine. So why has the news media become so obsessed with Trump, stemming back to the summer of 2015? Chair at the time of CBS, Les Moonves, at the beginning of the presidential campaign in February 2016, he said, "May not be good for America, but it's damn good for CBS. The money's rolling in. This is fun." So Trump's deeds and tweets were not only highly attractive, they sold well. Right? The period since the 2016 election has been extremely successful for the leading American media. Because of the Trump bump, the New Yorker, the Atlantic, the Washington Post doubled or tripled their subscriptions in the first year of Trump's presidency. TV benefited as well from the Trump bump. So for CNN, 2016 was the most profitable year in CNN's history. Those shows that focused heavily on Trump received a ratings boost, among them Stephen Colbert, Rachel Maddow, and Trevor Noah. Saturday Night Live increased its viewership by 44% with Alec Baldwin as Trump. The daily White House press briefing became, for political reporters, a career-launching pad like it's never been before. At BuzzFeed News, it was a good time to be a reporter covering Trump if you like money and going on TV. So Donald Trump makes the news great again. There's an old saying among reporters, if it bleeds, it leads. An appropriate contemporary version might be, if it's Trump, it leads. Columbia Journalism Review reported that placing international stories in American news outlets is getting harder unless they directly involve Trump. Same goes for book publishing. In 2018, every book at the top of the New York Times bestseller list had one thing in common: President Trump. Even children's books felt the Trump bump. Stephen Colbert's children's book, Whose Boat Is This Boat?, which he made out of Trump's post-Hurricane Florence comments, held #1 on the Amazon category. Trump bump also resulted in an admission surge to journalism schools. So this fooled many people to think that the news industry was on the ascent. Now, not all news outlets gained subscribers. Most did not. What did the Los Angeles Times, my hometown newspaper, do wrong? Right? It used to be an equal with the great East Coast papers, Wall Street Journal, New York Times, Washington Post, but not for the last 20 years. So why did the LA Times decline while the New York Times and the Washington Post blossomed? The LA Times had too much local news and too little Trump news. So the liberal news media profited from what they fought against, Donald Trump. And they don't talk about the commercial motives behind their coverage of Trump. Right? The news media profits if they magnify public fears about Donald Trump. Right? The money is in the fear. Right? In sports talk radio, the money is being interesting. In news, the money is in creating fear and intense emotions. Right? Create new bases for fear. Amp up the fear. Right? You'll make more money, and you set up a disastrous feedback loop for society. So the news media is incentivized to cover Trump's every move and to make it seem as challenging and disastrous and threatening and upsetting as possible. So it used to be accepted as natural for Fox News to be partisan, but now that's true for all the media, including those news media that tried to display impartiality. All right, and the major news outlets have given up on that since Trump. So right-wingers and conservatives are more active on the internet because they are less active in the mainstream media, right? The mainstream media, mainly controlled by people whose social, educational, and cultural backgrounds do not favor right-wing views. So activity on the right, on the internet, is forced upon them, right? The internet provides opportunities for dissidents that they do not have in the traditional media, right? The internet and social media are beneficial to those who are underrepresented in the mainstream media. Also, established media, legacy media are burdened with regulations, affiliations, and the risks of public backlash. So radicals, dissidents, and other suppressed movements tend to seek out the less pressurized spaces to vent their agendas. Now, it used to be that Fox News stood out for its naked partisanship. Now, CNN and MSNBC are mirror versions of it, tailoring their programming to the demands of their Trump-loathing audiences. Now, journalism is traditionally designed to sell news downward to the end user. But now, the only way to find a sustainable business model is increasingly to sell the news up to those who will subsidize, right? Those who will subscribe and those who will underwrite. So we have two ideal models of the media business, right? Journalism is either paid from below by those who want to read the news, or it's paid from above by those who want others to read the news. So serving the readers, right? Commercial journalism wants to portray the world as it is. Serving its patrons, political journalism, such as the New York Times, subscription journalism, seeks to picture the world as it should be, right? Commercial journalism, commercial news portrays the world as it is. Subscription news portrays the world as it should be. So news-selling journalism sells news down to readers, while agenda-selling journalism sells agendas upward to patrons. When you have a digital device at hand, you have a phone, you can't help but learn the news that is relevant to you. So no effort and no money is required for that. News will find you. Right? People do not hunt for news. The news hunts for people. Right? I love this Donald Trump comment today.
We'll keep monitoring. We'll come back if there's some stuff super compelling. The guy's playing ball. I mean, you can see why Trump likes him. He's just totally playing ball with what Donald Trump wants to do.
Keir Starmer.
All right, Sam, I want to go back and play number one again in just a second. And again, remember, Donald Trump said Zelensky was a dictator. He said it unambiguously. He was asked about it. He reaffirmed it. He wouldn't say it about Putin. And this is not some small thing, right? This caused, like, I get to use one of my favorite words. This caused an international brouhaha for days, right? Huge issue. And then he's asked again today to reaffirm it. And just look at the wisp of a smile on his face. Play number one again, please.
President, do you still think that Mr. Zelensky is a dictator?
Did I say that? I can't believe I said that. Next question.
I mean, again, I'm paid to talk about what he says and to put it in context and say what it all means. And it's like the guy just pretended he never said it, you know? So that's him. Like, none of you watching that are surprised. Oh my God, I can't believe you did that. That's a par for the course for Donald Trump. But it's ridiculous if your job is to say what does Donald Trump think? All right. Again, the PM here to flatter, increasing defense spending, saying the opportunity for a deal was created by Trump. Trump was right about this, right about that. But here's the real reason Donald Trump likes Starmer. Number three, please.
We look forward to welcome you in the United Kingdom. Thank you once again.
Thank you very much. What a beautiful accent. I would have been president 20 years ago if I had that accent. Thank you very much.
See, if it had been me, I would have called it plummy. But again, the guy comes with the accent, the defense spending, the praise for Trump, the letter from the king inviting him to his state visit. Of course, he's now his favorite European leader. All right.
It's hilarious that Keir Starmer is Trump's favorite European leader because, I mean, Keir Starmer is so anti-free speech. Wow. Okay, a lot of exciting things going on. Great case before the U.S. Supreme Court. So Laura Ingraham is discussing that straight discrimination.
Put on your protest shoes. Someone call Al Sharpton. Discrimination is afoot. Well, a woman says she was passed over for a promotion and demoted, while 2 lesser qualified workers who didn't even apply for the job, by the way, were moved up. Oh, I forgot to mention that she's straight and white, while the promoted workers and their boss were gay. Now, the woman Marlene Ames sued, and it's gotten her case went all the way to the Supreme Court, which seems ready to at least take her side.
The question presented is whether a majority group plaintiff has to show something more than a minority group plaintiff. Here, whether a straight person has to show more than a gay person. Everybody over here says no.
We're in radical agreement today on that, it seems to me.
Radical agreement from Justice Gorsuch. Joining me now, Jonathan Turley, George Washington University law professor, Fox News contributor. Jonathan, now, some of the articles are out there framing this as lowering the bar for white people to sue. Now, what's your take here on what happened at the court today?
No, that's an incredible misrepresentation of what's at issue in the case. There is an approach by the lower courts using a past standard that requires people in the majority, if you're white or straight, to satisfy an additional burden. And so you run the same course, but we give you a 20-pound bag of sand, and you need to carry that along the way. And the issue for the Supreme Court is, where in the federal law does it say that different approaches will be taken depending on whether you're straight or gay or white or black? And the justices were quite clear. They didn't see it in the federal law. And it does appear that the court is set to set this right. I think that
there are just so many bloody unnecessary emails. There's just a war on decency with emails. I just got an email from my bank telling me that my statement is available. What the hell? I don't care that my banking statement is available. I live on a spiritual plane. Like spare me this Narishkeit, this world of Gashmias. I live in a world of Ruknias, in an elevated world. Why the hell do they have to send an email to me telling me that my banking statement, monthly banking statement, is available? It's a shanda. Like so much trash just gumming up my phone, like 20 spam calls a day, 10 spam texts a day, dozens of spam emails a day. Will nobody rid me of these troublesome spam calls, spam emails, and spam texts? Asking for a friend. Please don't hurt anyone.
To get rid of that added test is going to not only simplify the matter for lower courts, but it's going to make it more equitable. That does not mean that this person can prove discrimination.
Wins on the merits. Yeah, wins on the merits. Right. That's just she can bring her case. So when we say takes her side, just to be clear, takes her side, that she can actually bring the case under a more equalized standard of discrimination. Jonathan, we have to get you on this breaking news. Happened right before the show. Federal judge in Northern District of California, shocking, William Alsup, Clinton nominee, blocked the Trump administration from ordering the firing of probationary workers, writing that the OPM, Office of Personnel Management, doesn't have any authority whatsoever under any statute in the history of the universe to hire and fire employees at another agency. They can hire and fire their own employees. Jonathan, I can't wait to hear this.
I think it's quite a reach for this judge, because the office was not firing these workers. It was directing agencies to look at these workers and fire them according to guidelines. They are part of a unitary department, an executive branch that is headed by a president who has said that he wants this to happen. And so I think that the court may be slicing this a little too thin, because the Trump administration is saying that order was for agencies themselves to make these decisions, review these positions. And they also said it is clear we want to downsize the federal government. And the expectation is that many, if not most of these people will in fact not be retained. But the President of the United States is allowed to run the executive branch, including running it with fewer people than his predecessor.
Well, the robed resistance continues, Jonathan. Hey, we appreciate having you on, as always. Thank you.
Thanks.
All right, coming up, part 2 of our inside look at Guantanamo Bay, the men and women in uniform who lead.
Okay, Halpern.
If she kills it, just because it's so hard. And I'd be surprised if she's a little nervous because she's never been on a stage like this. But I'd also not be surprised. Well, let me put it over. I doubt she'll do well, but she could. Because she does have the raw materials to do well. Very polished thinker, a good communicator. She knows her stuff, and she's very disciplined. I've learned from her folks. She's very disciplined, and she'll prepare really carefully. The text will be prepared carefully.
Okay, this is the Democratic response to Donald Trump's State of the Union. Alyssa Slotkin is getting the big stage.
Think she'll do on that
so
big stage.
I was glad that you brought this up because I do agree with you. It's a very difficult task to follow the grandeur of a State of the Union address. Like you were saying, this is more before the joint sessions of Congress. Here's where I think people get it wrong is I actually think whoever does the response should do it in front of an audience as well. There's nothing that says you have to do it with teleprompter in your kitchen, which is what Senator Katie Britt did last year, Republican senator. It was one of the worst performances I've ever seen. And I would actually say it was her handlers who treated it poorly. She does not sound like that in day-to-day conversation. So it was terrible. I couldn't believe how badly it was. And so I think anybody who does the response, try to move it to an audience so that it matches at least something that you get from a State of the Union, but we'll wait and see. I don't
hall or in Congress, there's applause, like there's energy, there's give and take, and Trump is great at the performance.
So the number one source for energy is connecting with other people, getting on the same page with other people and establishing a shared reality. That's why they're talking about there's so much more energy available to tap into when you're giving a speech in front of people.
Formative, side of politics.
And why live streaming is so hard because there's not an audience around you. It's just virtual.
And then you're just in this like cold, sterile place reading a teleprompter. And I think some candidates have gotten into trouble trying to kind of retort everything that's said. I think if she focuses like she just did, and I think this is where the Democratic Party is headed, kind of the contrast of what's coming in reconciliation.
Trump, take him seriously, but don't take him literally. So you always have to weigh those two things as you're talking about him. I think what is standing out to especially Republican voters right now is that they see that there is movement on the foreign policy stage. So they see that here is our president meeting with Zelensky, obviously meeting with the UK prime minister today. We saw more hostages being freed. So there is movement. There isn't this stalemate. So I think in that sense, it always plays well for Donald Trump. And as far as his style, this is Donald Trump. And by the way, I even was looking at your facial expressions, Mark. You laughed at some of the things he said. He's like a comedian, and you do have to laugh. I did think it was interesting talking about the accent of the UK prime minister. Just a couple weeks ago, he said he couldn't understand the accent of an Afghan female reporter. So he seems selective with accents at times. But he is funny. I think it's going to come down to when he meets with Zelensky tomorrow, whether or not Zelensky is there to play ball. Is he going to charm? Is he going to be upset with being called a dictator? Donald Trump throws these things out to see how people will respond. Many times it works in his favor. So I think the optics, the tone of seeing these two men together, that is going to tell whether or not there's going to be a deal.
Dan.
Yeah, look, I think for Trump, it's all about winning. He wants to have that press conference tomorrow where he gets, Zelensky to acknowledge that we're going to kind of repay America. I mean, the details aren't really there yet. And I think at the end of the day, Sean's always saying this, and I agree, the North Star of getting peace, of ending this war, is he has the country on his side. Like the politics are on his side. No Democrat was going to say, let's put boots on the ground. More and more Democrats were saying, we're queasy about all these appropriations and continuing it. So Trump has the country on his side. I think the real issue is going to be, as the prime minister said, does this peace hold? I mean, does Putin kind of just, spin his wheels and rebuild his armory and then turn around and try to take more? But likely, unfortunately, if that were to happen, it probably won't be on Donald Trump's watch. And so for him, peace and victory.
You might like Exet.
Cash Patel.
Yeah, I do. Well, let me give you somebody not a part of cabinet, and I heard about this the other day and it just came back to my mind, but Stephen Miller.
Yeah.
What I'm proud of him about is that he was a part of the Duke lacrosse case situation. He was in college then, he stood up then. Yeah. So I encourage people, young people out there, stand up for what's right, and opportunities will come your way.
A couple things real quick. I'm new to two-way as a result of Tucker Carlson. You were on Tucker Carlson, Mark, and I was like, wait a minute, am I actually hearing a balanced reporter giving both scenarios of how somebody could win or lose? And so that got me interested in two-way. And then, so thank you for that. Thank you for making me laugh every day. And Dan, thank you for actually giving me faith that I can have I could have a reasonable discussion with a Democrat. Post-COVID, it's just been and especially with Trump, it just becomes extremely difficult to have a political conversation from the right to the left. And so this platform has been really good for me to watch.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate all that very much.
Okay, so question is really kind of geared more towards Mark and Dan. And so we saw this in the first Trump administration. We saw it especially during COVID, and now we're seeing it again, which is, what is it about the left that they cannot comprehend, or they can't seem to grasp the idea that you can't take Trump literally at his word? So when today he's going through and saying, did I say he was a dictator? That's classic Trump. Trump, 50% of what he says is just, it's garbage. It's not what he really thinks or what it really means. He hates you one day, he loves you the next. Rubio, little Marco, is now in the cabinet. I mean, he's a real estate guy, and a real estate guy, that's what they do. They love you one day, you're their best friend. Next day,
Jason, you've cracked the code.
Yeah, and so one day you're doing him great services, and the next day he hates you and you're a horrible human being. But
last night, and peace, love, and understanding. But last night, listening to Eleanor a little bit on the Biden's decline, I do not know how the left and the right are going to have party unity and come together if we cannot recognize that the media is so complicit in the cover up of Joe Biden's decline to the point
you heard me try.
Yes, I know, but it is, unless the left can understand just how atrocious that was.
Mitchell, I couldn't agree more, Mitchell.
Yes. I'll move on from that.
Okay,
I'll throw that out there to any Democrat on this call. If you do not understand just how angry Red America was with what happens there, we are going to have a hard time coming together.
And I'll just say, Mitchell, it's not just the Democrats, it's my people in my profession. There has to be a full accounting of responsibility, because as I always say, you didn't need secret sources to know. You just needed a CSAN subscription, and they imperiled the safety of the planet.
Yes.
Because the personal ambitions of one family, it's extraordinary.
Yep.
All right, next point.
And everyone in DC who interacted with Biden in the last 6 or 7 years has a story of a firsthand experience that he was declining.
But now Jake Tapper is going to tell us all about it. So
let me just give some breaking news, and I try not to overreact to these district court judge rulings on Doge, because they'll be overturned, whatever. Federal judge in San Francisco just now found that the mass firings of probationary employees were likely unlawful. Again, as we've explained here, maybe probationary employees are not employees who are on probation. They're employees who are in new jobs, either new into the government or switched to some other position. So this ruling will get a lot of attention. Dan, I'm sorry, finish up.
So a couple things quick. One, these district judges ruling on nationwide injunctions is the most ridiculous thing ever.
Particularly if someone's already put in the chat a San Francisco judge making law for America.
That's the legal system, though.
It's existed. It's only existed for 60 years of our country.
Yeah,
it never occurred before this. It's a total anti-constitutional action.
It's ridiculous. Hold on 1 second. Beverly wanted to get it.
I just want to say real quick about Trump and Ukraine. I think one of the things we're going to have to look at, and this goes back to Dan's point about whether or not this can be lasting, is if this deal is passed as far as the rare earth minerals, what is going to be the U.S.'s security presence? So, of course, there's been a lot of debate about whether or not Ukraine should become part of NATO, because then NATO would have to defend them. What is the United States going to be on the hook for if we're providing security as well? So I think that's going to be tricky all the way around. But I would like to say, Mitchell, I just want to say I'm noticing the hubby T-shirt. 3 kids. I noticed that somebody even said the amazing camera skills, panning around to make sure when we're talking about the child, and you're discussing politics. So, and you went to the zoo. It's a good day for you.
Yes, but it just shows you not just the bias of much of the mainstream media, but also the guild mentality. And I think that's kind of what you're speaking to, John. There's a sense of, well, this is ours. You can't touch this, even if you.
Okay, Kip says, I heard Scott Adams call this the most impressive cabinet ever. Not sure by what barometer he's measuring. Any thoughts? I think that's ridiculous. It's the most impressive cabinet ever, perhaps in terms of communication skills, in terms of podcasting skills, in terms of TV skills. There are some good-looking people on it, but in terms of capability and effectiveness, it would rank below average in my view. So I have distinctly mixed feelings about Trump's cabinet, but I am enjoying the ride.
You literally own the paper. You can't interfere. And I have to say, that's kind of I'm going to speak ill of other generations here, or my generation. It's a kind of a millennial thing. How dare you tell me what to do? Who are you, Mr. Bezos, with your incredible businesses? that send Matt Continetti books on a daily basis and feed the world and house the government secrets and send commercial spacecraft to the stars? How dare you tell me that I shouldn't be, pro-Hamas on my Slack channel? That mentality is widespread in our press corps, and it's unhealthy. And people need to say, quit it.
Okay, Kip's coming with some gold in the comments on X. He says, money is a source of energy, and lack of money is also a source of energy, but energy is not created equal. The frantic energy is often not worth the squeeze. My world is coming to an end. I'm in desperate shape. I'm, facing living on the streets, right? That kind of desperate energy, not worth the squeeze. You want smooth energy. So you can take the right amount of caffeine, and there are ways that you can ingest caffeine where you get a smooth bump from it. But you usually don't want the frantic bump from caffeine. So there's good energy and bad energy, and the number one source of good energy is connecting with somebody else and establishing a shared reality and then a rhythm in the interaction. So you then build a relationship with the person, and out of that shared relationship comes an ethic. By the way, have you seen there's now an 11-part series on Australian cricket around 1990? The turn of that decade, and it's on Apple TV and it's on Amazon Prime. Now, bloody hell, like some of the segments are on women's cricket. I mean, I've only just started watching the first segment. Thank God there's no women's cricket in that. But in the intro, all right, they had women's cricket. Nobody cares about women's cricket. Like, get the bloody women's cricket, out of there. I just want a masculine, healthy, male Australian cricket coverage. But 11-part series, I mean, what a bonanza. I even put off, over lunch, watching episode 4, season 3 of Reacher so that I could delve into Australian cricket. All right. So let's get this straight. So I think the 15th century was 15th, 16th century dominated by Spain, 17th century dominated by France, 18th century dominated by England. England dominated the world until about the 1880s when America was the world's economic superpower. The West Indies dominated cricket in the 1980s. They only lost one test match series in the 1980s, but in the 1990s, Australia dominated world cricket.
Look, there is now this new way of being in journalism, which we alluded to with Jennifer Rubin, where individual people can try to sell their own brands on the free market, mostly using the platform called Substack, but you also start your own YouTube channel. If you don't want to do it in words, you could do all that kind of stuff. There is now the barrier to entry to try to make your own business out of yourself is now almost zero. And so go do it. Go do it, really. Like, you know what? Now it's cowardice if you don't. If you're going to take money from somebody.
Okay, I heard there are technical problems when I was talking about Trump's cabinet, so I thought, yeah, they may be the best podcasting cabinet, they may be the best on TV, they may even be the best looking, but in terms of capability and effectiveness, my suspicion is that they are below average. But there may be a setup where they are just the ones going on TV and doing the podcasts and getting photographed, and the real work is being done by their underlings, and perhaps they understand their role, and maybe everything's going to work out and be fantastic.
Whose views you detest, or whose businesses you don't like, or whose behavior you find abhorrent. Go see how you do on your own. That's what a brave person does. That's what a person of integrity does. That's now that you can. It used to be that you couldn't. There was no how.
Saying John Potter Horitz's sweater is stretch. You should see, bro, my shirt, right? If I was to start doing pull-ups in this shirt, it would just like pop all the buttons, and all my shirts are this brand and this size. So you want to talk about stretched, C40 hanging from a tree branch and puffing up some pull-ups.
How are you going to get into the public prints unless you knew somebody who owned a giant printing plant at a 19th century industrial factory that was producing this giant paper object that was delivered by hundreds of trucks? You couldn't ply your trade. And now you can. And anybody who is sitting there inside the Washington Post disgusted by the behavior of Jeff Bezos, go see what you can do. Enjoy. As for me, just as I am extraordinarily grateful to the donors who make Commentary Inc., a nonprofit 501c3, keep the lights on and help us continue to publish and do this podcast and try to influence people on matters of great importance. My presumption is that people choose willingly to give me and give Commentary the money to do that because they are in harmony with how we. For David Marinis, who is one of the storied writers at the Washington Post, who has been collecting hundreds of thousands of dollars a year, again, directly out of Jeff Bezos's pocket, because he has run that thing at a loss pretty much since he bought it, to say, I will never write for this place again. So don't write for it again.
And can I just
go resign and go write your filth somewhere. Like, this guy gave you money. He gave you money for years so you could do whatever it was you wanted. Read a book about Vince Lombardi, piss all over Donald Trump. I don't care. He let you do it. And now he's like, I think I'm done with that now. And the thing to do is to say, gee, that was really a great run. I'm really grateful to you for what you did for me.
I just want to add also that, like, what do these liberal journalists think the world of media has been like for conservatives for decades until the sort of new age of Substack and everything? For decades, if you were picked to be the token conservative somewhere, you were the luckiest there was. It was either that or like sort of conservative ghetto that you had to find work in. That was it. Interesting to see. I wonder how much that's going to flip if this is the start of that. I mean, obviously the mammoth thing here, the New York Times is going to survive as the New York Times. I mean, so that's not going to change.
Yeah, but it's not because of the news coverage.
The prices at the grocery store are going up because democracy is being taken away.
Democrats, dictatorship, and Doge.
We are in the middle of a totalitarian fascist coup in this country.
The job is already a cooker pressure. It's already incredibly difficult. Some people have said it's the hardest job in the White House. It's a hard job. It was really hard.
The binder is back without her binder.
Sometimes I would lay in bed and be like, oh my God, what is going to happen today?
We have some questions for you. Are you going to change the county's policy that allows biological men and females locker rooms and bathrooms?
Happy DEI Thursday.
Condoms for kiddies. This goes too far.
Plus,
Jesse, let me tell you something.
it's official. Foreign aid has been doged after John Roberts of the Supreme Court ruled that Trump has the right to freeze the money. USAID staff cleared out their desks today, and Musk says we've just saved $60 billion. DOJ found a $75 million contract for inclusive justice in Colombia, $40 million for indigenous peoples and Afro-Colombian empowerment, another $40 million for female empowerment in Colombia. Pretty sure this money's for cocaine. But don't worry, we're also going to give the Caribbean $3 million for being gay and lesbian. You're gay, and we want you to stay that way. And we still had money left over for terrorists.
Mr. Roman, are you aware that we are sending $40 million a week to the Taliban?
Yes, sir.
Can you name other instances of foreign aid going to terrorist organizations?
We have assisted al-Shabaab in Somalia. There's been instances of the Khamsi network in Sudan, Hamas, Islamic Jihad, Hezbollah, Kataib al-Hezbollah, Hayat Tahrir al-Shams in Syria. Dozens of terror organizations have received indirect assistance from U.S. foreign aid.
Are we funding terrorists so we have something to do with our missiles? The media doesn't want anything cut unless it's a circumcision.
Trump talked about all the stuff Doge is cutting and all the stuff they're not cutting, and it got weird.
20 million here, 30 million here for, a little educational course on something. Circumcision, right? Circumcision.
That long, rambling response actually reminds me of circumcision because somebody really should have cut that head off.
Doge has their brains so scrambled. Now The View is begging for deportations.
The guy was not born in this country, who was born under apartheid in South Africa, so has that mentality going on. He was pro-apartheid, as I understand it. Now I'm getting some flack because I said that Musk was pro-apartheid. I don't really know for sure if he was. He grew up at that time when apartheid was in full bloom, before the great Nelson Mandela fixed that. He was around at that time, but maybe he was, maybe he wasn't. He might have been a young guy, too.
Might have been.
So don't be suing me, okay, Elon? They're allowed to say any lie they want, but we have to be really strict. That's why this show's important.
Yeah.
So, did Joy Behar just say go back to Africa? I don't think you can say that, can you? And I guess we finally found out where Democrats stand on illegal immigration. Deport Musk and keep MS-13. They let millions of illegal Chinese, Muslims, and Venezuelans into America, but Musk, who's been a citizen for 22 years, he's got to go. So what if he's going to colonize Mars and build their electric cars? Go back to Africa. All of a sudden, saving taxpayers' money is treason.
The prices at the grocery store are going up because democracy is being taken away.
We are in the middle of a totalitarian fascist coup in this country.
But if we were being honest, there should be a breaking news banner on CNN and MSNBC all day long.
Yes.
We are in dictatorship right now.
Insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result. Well, Democrats must be insane to think the dictator hoax is going to work after losing every swing state with it. And now they think Big Balls is going to peek into their tax returns.
If we had a president AOC, a liberal Democrat president, who brought in a bunch of her friends, and they brought their laptops, and they started taking all the data and doing whatever they wanted to, Republicans would be in the streets as well they should. This is no way to run a government. This is a dangerous precedent that's being set.
Well, they did that. Where was Van Jones when Trump's tax returns got leaked? That little liberal, leaky little John, remember, stole 400,000 of Americans' tax returns. 400,000. Leaked them to the press, and Maddow waved it in the air like it was a righteous act. And leaky...
Wait, if we're living in a fascist dictatorship, then you would not be able to criticize Donald Trump on TV, or you'd have to fear for your life, right? They know they're lying, right? To say that we live in a fascist dictatorship, but you're perfectly free to say the most horrible things about the president, the leader of this fascist dictatorship, right? Doesn't quite make sense. Were Germans free to broadcast their negative views of Adolf Hitler, that he was so awful, or were Soviets free to publicly broadcast their views that Joseph Stalin was so awful? Just boggles the mind.
Little John was just a contractor. Elon's a presidential appointee who hasn't stolen or leaked a thing. Democrats are worried about security because they're the ones who can't be trusted with it. Hillary had a home server in her basement with secrets in it. And when she got caught, acid washed it. Elon's not just about cutting the fat. Listen, hundreds of federal workers are being promoted daily every time we encounter excellence. Democrats are squealing Trump's going to cut Medicaid, but look what we found here. California was caught using Medicaid to pay for art and music lessons.
Okay, question from the chat. Luke, have you had your 20 years on YouTube anniversary yet? No, I don't think I joined YouTube until 2007. I don't think it was till 2007 that I bought a video camera with an external mic. So YouTube, however, it began in 2005, February 14, 2005. I don't think it became important to me until about 2007. I wasn't one of the first adapters of Facebook either. So I started blogging July 3, 1997, the same day I got my first real computer. I initially started posting on Usenet, rec.arts.movies.erotica in something like November of 1996, but I didn't own my own real computer until July 3, 1997. And then I didn't start putting photos on until early 99. I think I bought my first digital camera, started adding photos to my website. And then Facebook. I wasn't quick on Facebook. I don't think I joined Facebook until about 2005. Don't think I joined Twitter until about 2007. So I wasn't always the earliest adapter. I started doing live stream podcasts circa 2003, I think.
Oregon was caught using Medicaid for cooking classes, air conditioners, and mini fridges. DOJ is saving us all money, and Democrats are fundraising to stop it.
I just left a massive citizen meeting that I organized on about 24 hours, 48 hours notice. Hundreds of people standing up with one voice to say we are not going to allow for the billionaires to take over our government. And I need your help right now to stand up and help me build the kind of political operation all across the country that we need to fight back against this hateful, destructive agenda from Donald Trump and Elon Musk.
Now things are starting to get dangerous. Police just arrested a trans man named Lucy.
On February 7th, police reported there was an arson.
Okay, Kip says YouTube was awesome until 2012. YouTube was awesome until something like September of 2018, right? That's when the giant censorship hit. So YouTube was pretty wide open until circa August, September of 2018, as I remember it. And I think I joined MySpace in 2002. Does that make sense? MySpace was a big deal until about 2004. I remember you'd put your top 8 friends on there, and when I took Holly Randall out, she said, "I don't care, but why'd you take me out?" And I said, "Well, it just hurts too much to see your face and your profile there after we'd broken up.
It's an attempt, plus acts of vandalism, including graffiti on some of the vehicles deemed offensive and hateful in nature.
February 24th, Monday evening, we were working surveillance where we then encountered the defendant.
The suspect, identified as 40-year-old Lucy Grace Nelson, was stopped before committing what would have been considered a Class 3 felony. Nelson was arrested on multiple charges, including felony mischief, but the most concerning one to police was the use of explosives or incendiary devices.
The devices that were discovered had potential for serious damage.
The left spends all day calling Elon a fascist who should go back to Africa, and all of a sudden, Trantifa's planning explosives at Tesla dealerships. The threat level is so high that Musk has U.S. Marshals augmenting his private security. I guess Democrats only like billionaires who add to the debt. Elon's going to push hard no matter what it is. He's a pioneer. His brain's wired to break things and create things and not be like everybody else. So when Trump and Elon see a wall, they don't stop. They go right through it.
Isn't it like mind-blowing that this has happened? I mean, it just... And what, by the way, why do we still know nothing about that guy in Butler? What's going on? Cash is going to get to the bottom of it.
Yeah, there you go.
By the way, yeah.
Woo. If Democrats are worried what we're finding in government, the graft and their kickbacks, wait until we start sniffing around Butler. Wait until Doge, Cash, and Bondi pull the files on Butler, PA. The FBI closed that investigation real quick. No toxicology, body cremated, electronics black-holed, and the Crooks family hires an expensive attorney. With what money? Pinch yourself. Go ahead, do it. We're living through history. No one's been able to cut waste in Washington. Nixon, Reagan, Clinton, Obama, they all tried, couldn't do it. Until now.
We are having great success in slimming down our government. It's been really very successful, and some took payouts and buyouts, and others took other things, and some people we're finding out don't even exist. We're finding that we have a lot of people that don't exist that people thought that did.
We're even digitizing the retirement cave.
The administration came to us with a challenge, something that we've never done before. Process a retiree end-to-end digitally without printing anything to paper. The deadline, in a week. The first time I went to the mine, the picture I had in my mind was something from the X-Files. Some retirees have a lot of paper, a lot more than others, and that there were a couple we encountered that actually had pallets of communication.
We were asked, how long would it take to do this completely digitally? We gasped and said, 7 months, maybe 12 months.
We got it done in record times within 2 days without printing one piece of paper.
Things are changing fast. And there's a lot of emotion around that.
So I started making my primary income online, I think, towards the end of 1997. And I primarily earned my living online from the fall, something like October of 1997 until October of 2007. Let's go to Kip's comments. MSNBC has their work cut out for them, trying to make out-of-work IRS agents look pitiful. What say you? Well, as I mentioned at the beginning of the show, the future for a business model for journalism is to meet the moral validation needs of a particular audience. So if you sell them, that you will present them news in a way that is conducive to their hero system, then people will pay not so much to find out the news, but to validate their pre-existing feelings, according to this new book on postjournalism. Desperate energy is what makes vulnerable young women do wonderful things. Yeah, I remember I was seeing this woman, and once somebody had robbed her, right? Just broken into her apartment and robbed her. She just felt awful and insecure, and I was living out of my car at the time, and so I stayed with her for quite a few nights. We had something up to around 15,000 trans soldiers. I guess they wanted the government to pay for a lifetime of trans care and all the procedures that they require. Yes, it's a real honor for doctors and hospitals, right? Once you get someone to transition into gender-affirming care, you've got a lifelong earner on your hands. MSNBC badmouths Trump and Elon and Doge for trimming the government fat, but they themselves are making Doge-style cuts across their channel. Hypocrisy or something else? Well, they would say our cuts are necessary. Trump's cuts are making the world worse. YouTube, right? Has anyone been testing the limits of YouTube since they loosened the reins? So I haven't heard anyone complain about getting strikes. So certainly YouTube will block comments automatically by algorithm, but I can't remember anyone talking and complaining about getting a strike. I'm sure it happens. I just don't recall it. And I can't recall any news articles about how major brands are having their ads run against edgy content on YouTube. What was the biggest event for Trump's election? Was it Elon buying X in 2022, or was it the Butler, Pennsylvania assassination attempt? I think it was Elon buying X. I was surprised that Trump's poll numbers didn't move following the assassination attempt.
No one says this was going to be easy. Voters said when they put Trump back in the White House, they wanted him to come in and deliver, quote, complete overhaul. This is going to make a lot of people very uncomfortable. Trump's been shot. Elon, the second most targeted man in the world. The Democrats are desperate, and their bases are telling them to go harder. Ironically, the voice of reason in a moment like this is Pretty Boy Floyd.
We had Trump before. We didn't appreciate him. But I think Trump is a great president. Actually, he's the best president. In my eyes, he's the best president we ever had. Great businessman. Trump has done an amazing job. And a lot of people around America are upset. But no matter who goes in the White House, we're always upset.
Right.
And I think Trump is the man for the job.
Ohio's future governor, Vivek Ramaswamy, joins me now. All right, Vivek, I'm going to have to call you governor soon. I'm just getting it out of the way. The hostility towards Elon Musk, where does this come from?
It comes from a place of irrationality. For the last several years, people have had Trump derangement syndrome. That derangement syndrome has now expanded to include Elon and others. The fact of the matter is, rationally speaking, though, Jesse, we have a $36 trillion national debt problem. we have to cut trillions of dollars in spending to rationalize. Our budget wasn't that much bigger. In 2019, it was $4.5 trillion. This isn't an unthinkable amount. We're at $7 trillion today. Another basic principle, the people we elect to run the government should be the ones who actually make the laws, not unelected bureaucrats. That's not controversial. The country was founded on that very premise. And I do think.
Okay, I was just checking up, looking at something on X, saying that our culture war was lost when George Steinbrenner started playing a gay sex song for the groundskeepers at Yankee Stadium. Oh, Don Lemon and Megyn Kelly had a public spat over their husbands. Don Lemon to Megyn Kelly, tell your husband to stop looking at my husband. Okay, no, I'm sorry, I don't even want to know anything more about that. No.
It's because of the recipes and the puzzles.
Wordle saves the New York Times.
Wordle
right?
and Wirecutter.
Consumer Reports, yeah.
And Consumer Reports, exactly. Like, that's what saved the New York Times. It wasn't, lying about it wasn't publishing Trump's tax records, which they had no business doing, and it wasn't lying about Russiagate.
But
that's not what kept them going.
The lesson that Bezos should take from that reality of the New York Times is to give people not what they want. You don't just want to serve them up, but practical things. So I want some more local news, Jeff Bezos, if you're listening, more local news about how DC as a city actually functions. It's a very powerful place, and a lot of stuff goes on here that we need to know.
To make money on it, you would need to have like a Pokemon Go version of local news. Like, you put on your augmented glasses and then you can go and
is
look
my
around.
nightmare, but okay, you're probably
right. That's kind of what I'm saying.
Well,
the New York Times model
is
the same as the publishing industry, and I think it gets again to the self-conceit of a lot of people who write and talk for a living. I'm one of them. But a lot of people who write and talk for a living think that people actually like what we do and value it, when in fact the cost of writing and talking is literally zero. And so in the publishing industry, it's like, oh, these great books that come out, another Pulitzer Prize winner, the National Book Award winner. Why does publishing exist? Bibles and cookbooks. Why does the New York Times exist?
Romantasy.
And romantasy now, right? Why does the New York Times exist? It's recipes.
Books.
Yeah,
we're free writers.
That's what actually subsidizes.
Yes.
The 800-page biography of Vince Lombardi.
I got two important anecdotes for you. So in the 1970s, my late mother went to work at Basic Books, which is still extant, which was part of Harper and Row. And Basic Books published social science, works of social science stuff. Irving Kristol started Basic Books. And it actually made money, produced a couple of gigantic bestsellers in her time. Gödel, Escher, Bach being one famous one, Wealth and Poverty by George Gilder being another, various other ones. And one day her boss, Erwin Glickus, said to her, how do you think we stay in business? And she hadn't worked in publishing before, so she said, I don't know how we stay in business. And he said, this entire firm, Harper and Row, is supported by one book. It is called Linda Goodman's Sun Signs. And it was a book about astrology, and it sold 3 million copies a year. And the royalties from that book and the proceeds from that book were what supported the publication of Visible Man by George Gilder, or there are 15 books on Matt's bookshelf behind him if you were watching.
Thomas Sowell's collected works.
Exactly. All of that. That's publishing. That's what Matt's talking about, right? There's that in publishing. And a famous survey done at the Washington Post in the late 70s, early 80s, they spent a huge amount of money on a readership survey. Papers generally didn't do readership surveys. They were too hard or they were too expensive. No one really cared. But they decided they wanted to know what people read in the paper. And it was until that moment, really, in American journalism, people thought things like, people are buying the paper to read George Will. People are buying the paper to, read, I don't know, Flora Lewis, though she didn't write she wrote for the New York Times. That's really what's important. That's what people go there. They go to the op-ed page. They want to know what the editorials are saying. They want this, they want that. Washington Post discovered that the single most read thing in the Washington Post, a paper that had 60% of the market, 60% of its market, that was Washington, the DC, the Virginia suburbs, the Maryland suburbs. Millions of people, 60% of the market. The single best read thing in the Washington Post was Walter Scott's Personality Parade, which was the inside front cover of Parade magazine, which was an insert into the Washington Post published by Parade magazine. Not even produced by the Washington Post. The most read thing in the Washington Post was something that was inserted into the Washington Post. Either Parade paid them, or I don't even know, or Parade gave it to them for free. I don't remember. Parade was this, like Sunday supplement with, it was like 16 pages long. It's hard to believe. It was a huge thing in its day. And of course, this was a long dark night of the soul for everybody in journalism, learning that in fact what was read by people was this: are Sonny and Cher still friends now that they've gotten divorced? Why, yes, they are co-parenting their child Chastity together, and they try to maintain a good friendship. That is what people read in the Washington Post in the late 70s and early 80s.
Okay, but this example, as well as the ones we've given of the more recent New York Times, suggests something that journalists are not embracing, and that's a sense of humility and gratitude. And that's actually where we must talk about the gaslighting that's entered the chat with Jake Tapper and Alex Thompson's big book about what went wrong, what was the big cover up on Joe Biden and his health. This, to me, is going to be a hinge moment for media, because the immediate response of the public, as judged by some social media commentary and other stuff I've seen, mainly online, granted, but also folks I've talked to in the last 24 hours, is people are appalled at this. The hubris of the very people who manufactured the cover up for 4 years and happily did so and denounced those who raised any questions at all, coming out with a big book. And I will say, I'm surprised Alex Thompson is co-authoring this with Jake Tapper. Thompson actually is one of the few reporters who did raise some of these issues towards the end of Biden's term and got absolutely slammed for it. So maybe it was a strategic decision on his part. But I cannot wait to see what the response is to this book.
I think that this book is now a hinge moment. So this book, it's called Original Sin, and the topic of it is the cover-up of Joe Biden's decline. So there are several questions that are going to be raised before anybody gets a chance to read it. Number one, in what year does the narrative begin? Will it begin in 2018 or 2019? I'm sure it'll begin with some anecdote from the night of the debate or something like that. But where does the narrative of the book, how long does it extend? Number one. And number two, how much will be dedicated and devoted to the role of the Washington press corps, the White House press corps, and people like Jake Tapper in perpetuating the idea that Biden was fine? And as we do every single time that we talk about this, I am going to say that if you were obsessive enough to go back 3 or 4 years into this podcast's archives, you would find that at least once a week, we said something beginning probably in the middle of 2021 about Biden's decline. And probably in 2020, and maybe even in 2019, if you remember those debates, and this, of course, is why I say I wonder what's going to happen. Whichever Castro brother ran for president, and I can't remember which one. It was neither Raul nor Fidel, but it was it was Joaquin or
Julian,
right? Which one was it?
It was Joaquin who ran.
Okay, I can't remember which one ran for president. Attempted to do a cognitive decline trap on Biden during a debate, and his candidacy was ended by the outrage expressed at the disrespect being shown to poor Joe Biden by this effort on his part to call attention to the fact that Biden had just contradicted something that he had said 2 minutes earlier. And then he said something like, "Did you forget?" Oh, how dare he? How dare he do such a thing? This is just awful.
There was another famous moment at one of the debates, too, afterward, when Dr. Jill went up to the stage and grabbed Biden by the hand right as soon as it was done. And, of course, that same gesture, when it was repeated at the Democratic fundraiser in June of last year, was with Obama, was one of the signal moments, and of course became the subject of the most important op-ed ever, George Clooney's New York Times piece.
Yes, it was the George Kennan. It was the George Kennan memo of our time.
The ex-telegram of our time was George Clooney in the New York Times saying it's time for Joe to go.
Yeah,
but so you can start earlier.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. I mean, by the way, we definitely talked about it in 2020 because part of the what we said, part of the advantage that Biden had in sort of running from the quote basement because of the pandemic was that people weren't exposed to his cognitive decline.
So let's talk about this for a minute.
I just want to say one thing with the book. They can. I don't know if they're going to do this. They can focus the story entirely on the administration, right? And they could, and in doing that, they could say, so this is how the administration fooled us. That's our story. This is how the media got conned by the White House. And
they will throw under the bus the people closest to Joe Biden in order to protect their own furtherance of this lie.
Okay, so let's offer we're all going to read this. Everybody is going to read this book. This is the story that we all want to read. I mean, even though Biden's long gone, I mean, we all want to know. We all want to know what the details are. We all want to know.
You should buy one copy and share it. I don't want to fund this. I don't want to encourage this kind of behavior in reporters.
He's now, Biden's not gone. He got the MCAA rep And maybe I'm thinking he should star in a remake of On Golden Pond, kind of put him out there and talk about aging in a very kind of, Twilight type drama, Twilight years drama, not Twilight the Vampire Saga.
Yeah, there's and Jill Biden going, "You old poop, you're my knight in shining armor."
Don't you think that they would win a bunch of awards? Yeah. On Golden Pond, featuring the Bidens.
on Golden Rehoboth.
Yeah, on Golden Beach.
Yeah. Okay, so there is a scenario in which they're honest. There's a scenario in which this book is half about the government and half about the media.
No.
Now here, okay, you're saying
cannot
no.
be honest, Jake Tapper would have to implicate himself, and Jake Tapper is never going to implicate himself. He won't do it.
Okay. People aren't gonna like that I say this. When George Stephanopoulos left the Clinton White House, he wrote a book called All Too Human, which is one of the best books ever written about working inside a White House. And much of it was about his own hubris and misbehavior. And it was a clarifying moment. It actually helped him move on to the second part of his career, because he was willing to say things and reveal things that most loyal White House aides wouldn't necessarily do, and talk about his own malfeasances and arrogances and stuff like that. There is a world in which
I think it's different, though.
I gotta say, I'm gonna be the cynic here, because the only reason he did that, the only reason he betrayed those internal White House discussions is because he wanted to pivot to a media career, and that is how you make your bread and butter in the current political media. And he saw that. He was the first to do it. He certainly wasn't the first aide to betray his president.
Let's say
I'm not buying that.
Let's say that Matt and I,
story.
We're all editors, so let's say that we are Jake Tapper's and Thompson's editors, right? And they come to us and they give us the manuscript and they say what's missing. So I would say, let's say they produce the book that you, the cynic, say, and that we have infinite amounts of time before the release of the book comes out to say, this is how you actually do this. What would you tell them they need to reveal that they do not reveal in your cynic's version of what they will produce, which is, as I say, just the White House, here's what they did. They had a meeting and Biden, drooled into his pencil cup and nobody said anything. And Jill said, if you say a word, I'm going to, have the Secret Service make the dog bite you or whatever. I mean, so what would you tell them? You would say, okay, what's missing? Here are the paragraphs that are missing. What would you insist they insert? I'm serious.
A description of what they thought when, for example, they'd go to a White House press conference, having already pre-submitted their questions to the White House, and seeing Joe Biden hold the card that has their face on it with the pre-screened question.
All three White House press conferences.
Yes, exactly.
It's interesting. Tapper was one of the moderators of the Trump-Biden debate, so you could begin the narrative there, saying one of us was there, and here's what happened. The Free Beacon, though, has a pretty remarkable supercut on its website, going through all the times that Tapper shut down discussions of Biden's age prior to the debate in 2024. So as an editor, you would probably say, hey, you have to kind of reckon with that. I mean, the media piece is interesting because remember when Alex Thompson has been following this story forever, and he's been the best Biden reporter. And so there are going to be a lot of scoops. But when the Wall Street Journal last spring tried to talk about Biden's age and broach the subject, it was denounced by the Media Guild in the same way that Bezos is being denounced by the Media Guild. And so that has to be part of the story too. But I think you're right to suggest that this story, the book they're going to tell, is really about the Biden family's attempt to hide Joe Biden's condition.
You make a comment like that. How do you think it makes little kids with stutters feel when they see you make a comment like that?
It's very clearly a cognitive decline.
Okay.
That's what I'm referring to. It makes me uncomfortable.
You have I can't. That's so amazing. It's so amazing to me that
try and figure out an answer.
A cognitive decline. President Biden embraces his stutter, talking about it, while Trump mocks it, exaggerates it, belittles it. He's sharp physically. I mean, mentally. Yeah. I think the question is physically, right?
Right.
More so?
Right.
Right. And the guy who's his chief opponent is only 3 or 4 years younger than him.
Exactly.
I mean, you have questioned President Biden's age, mental fitness, ability to lead. Of those supporting Biden, you said, quote, shame on all of you pretending everything is okay. You're leading us and him into a disaster. Do you worry that you damaged him at all? I don't doubt that you got hugs and handshakes behind closed doors today, and maybe even publicly, some of them because they like you personally. But I've heard a lot of really nasty stuff about you from your Democratic colleagues. Sure. I mean, just like, what is he thinking? Exercise in narcissism. I mean, false claims to the Wall Street Journal about President Biden's mental fitness and acuity. He's 81, and his memory, it doesn't seem great. It's not horrible, but
I don't understand the outrage. Quote, behind closed doors, Biden shows signs of slipping, unquote. The Wall Street Journal is owned by News Corp, which is run by the Murdochs. Beyond the headline, there is some critical nuance here. The article is mostly based on observations of Republicans, with former Speaker Kevin McCarthy the only one going on the record. They do note in the article that most of the criticism comes from Republicans. Have you heard any concerns from anyone who has met with President Biden about him seeming a little slower?
No.
The Russians are trying to make us and the public not trust our election integrity. Joe Biden has dementia, all this stuff.
Yeah, so Jake Tapper did everything he could to promote the lie that questioning Joe Biden's mental acuity was an unforgivable sin, right? He participated in a gigantic cover-up of Joe Biden's obvious mental decline. Mark Halperin says he thought it was obvious in 2017 that Joe Biden had senility, right? It was just blindingly obvious that this was a man who was not there. And yet Jake Tapper and the rest of the mainstream media, right, they actively participated in trying to shore up the Biden administration.
From the American public for about 6 years.
But, you know, I just also want to say, I mean, what I would say is missing would Tapper would never be able to work again. I mean, you know, what I would say is, what were you really all thinking during all of this? Because there were some glimpses. I mean, there were very few people, but one of the reasons that I actually respect the hell out of Van Jones is that he was one of the few who got on like CNN way before the debate and said, you know, we're hearing a lot in whispers from Democrats who are really concerned about Biden's decline. So we know there were conversations. We know
Axelrod was saying similar
absolutely
things very
right.
early on.
So come on, how did you handle all that stuff as it was the whispering and the rest of it? Yeah.
Okay, so in the world in which the book that is produced is the most honest and authoritative, I would say, look, Jake Tapper worked at CNN. I think they're now on their he's on his third or fourth boss since Biden came in. I mean, I can't remember who they were. There was Jeff Zucker, then there was whatever the hell his name is, Licht.
Jeff Peter, Paul, and Mary. Yeah, they're cycling through CNN.
Now there's Thompson, another Thompson, I think is now running it. Anyway, so 3 or 4 people, right? So got nothing to fear from them. So what if there had been guidance from above? I mean, that's what I'm saying. Like, was there guidance from above? Was it the corporate line that CNN was not to cover Biden's
that doesn't excuse an
I'm not saying it
reporter.
excuses it.
Yeah.
No. I'm not saying it excuses it. I'm talking about whether if you are writing a history of a cover-up, and the cover-up has 2 faces. One is what went on internally to cover it up. And then the other is the communication across this weird amalgam that people are now worried about with the new White House press corps rules of the administration and all of its friends in the press and everybody in the Biden administration whose spouses worked at the networks and places like that and were the commentators and all of that. How was the shut up, he explained message transmitted? And was it transmitted or was it all understood? Because I'm telling you, some of it was transmitted and there's more of it than we realize. Catherine Herridge yesterday came out with footage, like pictures she took of CBS seizing her notes on investigation she had done into Hunter Biden and other things that it took her 1.5 years to get back from them. They took the notes that she had taken claiming they were CBS's property because she was an employee of theirs. In order, it was catch and kill. They took the stuff to prevent it from being used.
Right, but this is the point. This is why this book, I think, cannot do what a book that wants to actually tell the story truthfully must do, which is that it's bad enough what happened internally, and particularly the role of people like Hunter Biden and First Lady Jill Biden played in this cover-up, because we know they were central figures. But it never would have survived and continued if the press hadn't also joined in the cover-up. And that's where I think whatever they try to do to focus on one and not the other, or to maybe throw some corporate bosses under the bus as a token, they are not. Maybe Alex Thompson could have told this story himself because he was on this beat and he was raising these issues. But once you add Jake Tapper to that mix, I do not trust that they are going to have an honest accounting of what went on among journalists, what they knew, when they knew it, all of this stuff with someone who was an insider participating in the cover-up. Unless he's had some dramatic mea culpa, is shifting careers, and is going to blow up everything behind him and walk away from his TV career. In that case, maybe he can tell the truth, but I'm doubtful.
Well, a great book that is cited for generations as a new example of a work of political media self-criticism and honesty is not something to sneeze at. And so Jake Tapper is somebody that I like personally. I like.
Okay, let's leave it there. I'll talk to you later. Bye.